everybody, Medic MZ here and have Nurse Detox.
Hello.
And Detox and I were having a little chat about mental health and how that looks for specifically military health professionals and the impact that it has on us as individuals, as troops, as veterans. The crisis, as we know, has shifted and evolved throughout the years. Some things have gotten better while other things maybe have gotten worse.
Yeah, well, I was going to add to it that, medical across the board, whether we're in the military or out of the military, is stressful. I mean, we all are dealing with high acuity, stressful situations. It sucks a lot of times, and we don't get to fall apart, do we? We're in the middle of a code. We definitely do not have time to go, oh my God, this lady's about to lose her husband. Like, whatever. We don't have time for that. We're like, the other side is, nah, we're going to lose him. We're going to save him. And that's going to be the end of the story. And we do our best to do that. What happens when we keep tucking it away? Because guess what? We can't go home. I mean, sometimes we do, but we really can't go home and just unload. You can't unload on your kids and your husband every single day, that much drama every day. We know that. So we kind of keep it to ourselves. And so there is a cost to that. And the difference between medical in the military and out of the military is that we have another layer, the military. So if we start falling apart and we need help, it's not like the civilian side. I think that's what we were going to talk about is what does this look like for medical professionals in general? And how are we a little bit different than our counterparts on the civilian side? Like, let's talk about stats.
So in the consensus we kind of came up with is for those folks in uniform working in healthcare, we've got some cards stacked up against us. There was a report that contained some kind of stark statistics, right? There's an estimated 7,057 service members that have died during military operations since 9/11. That's in theater, overseas during deployment, while suicides among active duty personnel and veterans has reached over 30,000 people.
Actually, I'm going to add to that one. This was just told to me. A friend of mine went to suicide awareness, like suicide prevention, like conference or symposium. It was a one-day thing. And he texts me and he goes, we're here listening to people from the DOD give statistics. He goes, you do not want to hear this. And I said, what is it? He goes, the statistics they gave was now, instead of 22 a day, this was 31 per 100,000.
That is not the direction we want. No. I mean, that is an alarming rate all on its own. And so reading through those statistics kind of made me wonder, how do we get there? How do people get to that point? And it could be a multitude of reasons. It may have everything to do with deployment. It may not. Not every veteran looks the same. Our experiences are different. Our upbringing is different. Our traumas, our struggles, how we cope. We are all unique and have different stories. And just to break that down a little bit further, I was looking at this from both a combat lens and one from everything else. So from a combat standpoint, current day warfighters have had to deal with the prevalence of things like IEDs, which then, oftentimes turn into TBIs, which can directly correlate with mental health.
Just for civilian counterparts, IEDs bomb, and then it causes a big bang to the head.
Thank you.
Problems, yes.
Appreciate you. Kind of still with that combat theme too is veterans that deal with moral injuries stemming directly from their time in theater, or we call it the AOR, their area of responsibility, in the shit, in the sandbox, whatever you want to call it, they're out there getting it done. And with that, sometimes does come moral injuries, things like taking another person's life or witnessing the death of a close friend.
And you couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
Or you were caught involved in some operation that went bad and there were unanticipated deaths. Anytime I hear people say it was a bad mission, I will guarantee you that if you peeled back that onion a little bit, there would be civilians and children involved, especially children. Because I will tell you what I see is what messes up the military and medical, but military in general. As a matter of fact, military medicine story for you. A good friend of mine came into the military as kind of a second career. So she came in a little bit older, and she's a nurse. She's been a nurse for years, and she was going to deploy. And it was her first deployment. And we talked about deployment and preparation and what she'd have to do. And yep. And like everybody on their first deployment, excited, this is what we trained for. We're ready to go. We got this, right? And when she came back, and I remember when she came back because they actually stayed with us for a couple of weeks because they were also in the middle of moving. Another joy of the military, come back from deployment while you're in the middle of moving. That happens too. And she came back and I was like, whoa, she looked ass beat. I was like, how are you doing? And I didn't push for any info because I knew better. But over time we talked, and you know what crushed her? It was the children that they took care of. And it wasn't just a child that fell and broke their leg. These were children that were being used as the bombs. I mean, they were basically the suicide bombers. And so the family or the people that were educating them, I guess, for a lack of a better term, or guiding them and instructing them and training them, are like hyping them up, and you put this on, you're doing this for us and our country and all that. And they go in, and then guess what? It didn't fully go off. They're severely injured. So now the Americans take these children, right, into the hospital. They care for them. They bring them back to health. And then they have to release them back to their culture, right, out onto the economy, back to the culture. And she said it was the most heartbreaking thing I had ever done in my entire life. She goes, nobody prepared me for that. She was a mom. And she goes, because we knew and they knew that they weren't going to live. They were ashamed now because they didn't fulfill the mission, and there was no resources to help take care of them. And they would be screaming and crying, holding on to the nurses and techs and doctors and stuff, not wanting to go. She's like, you would be peeling them off. She's like, these are children that I was rocking at night from their nightmares and everything. Yeah, completely messed her up. It was a long time before she could really settle.
I mean, that is a perfect example of moral injury.
Yeah.
Right there. That's profound. So really just how destructive that can be. These men and women are seeing homes and businesses that may have been thriving before now bombed, innocent civilians,
yep,
kids maimed,
yep,
just like that example. And on the flip side of that, kids that become orphans too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a shit show.
Well, it's so culturally different than what we are used to at all. So another short story was a person I worked with. She was a badass. She was on the convoys to Baghdad. She was one of those up in the turret, that big convoy that we all watched. She was on that. And I remember we had to go do some recon out at the base here near us, right? And we were looking to see if we could do some training out in their field area. And we ended up on the backside of the space where they did training for security forces and different places like that. And I remember going up there, and I looked, and we were getting toured around. It was it was pretty cool. It was like a whole made up little mini city. And we got brought into this big garage. And I looked around, and I'm like, there's bikes and toys. And I'm like, do you guys collect for toys for tots? And before another word could be said, the person with me said, no, ma'am, this is what they use for training. And I looked at her, and I looked over at the guy, and he said, yes, ma'am, this is our desensitizing training. And I went, explain. No. And he said, because people that we deploy, we are parents. Many of us are parents. And what they do is they take toys that are familiar to us or remind them, and they put IEDs in them. And the person with me, she looked at me and said, and until you have a 9-year-old aiming a gun at you, you will never know. And I just looked at her and I went, wow, because fortunately I've never had a 9-year-old aim a gun at me, although my kids may have had thoughts on occasion, but I mean, really, like that, what does that do to the mind? So, and that was a medic. She was a medic. And we are brought in to, what's the credence? Do no harm, right? And we are there to care. And she's looking down the barrel of a gun, and at the end of it is a 9-year-old. And her mother instincts are like, oh, no, I take the gun away from you. And then the military is like, don't go near it. You be wearing it, so huge conflict right there. This is the stuff that, like, you're reading the statistics of the military, right? Were there other stats on there?
Yeah. Some others.
Because then we'll talk about some stats for the medical side of it.
Which is a whole other layer that we have to face too. So going back to the why behind those statistics, I mean, another great example would be the recent drawdown of U.S. forces out of Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. That put a lot of people in a tailspin. And, that was read as just another headline for many Americans, but for many others,
it was stressful. That pullout was very stressful. Yeah, we were part of that. Like, my husband was out, but the people that, remember, they worked with friendly forces. I mean, they worked with the Afghans. So my husband's trying to get reports on, is this person out? Is this Afghan out? Is that one out? That mental stress of, they don't know if they got out. The interpreters. Yeah. Woo, those are very high risk jobs right there. So yeah, just that thought right there.
Yeah. I mean, and it left a lot of them, I think, feeling like there was a loss of time and energy and effort, blood, sweat, and tears, all of it. And so from a combat standpoint, there's a lot to talk about in regards to mental health. But kind of shifting gears for a second, what about everything else? Because it would be unfair to say the only people that develop PTSD or mental health diagnoses are those who deploy. Totally, untrue. There's plenty of reasons why somebody might develop those things who never stepped foot in the AOR. Extended periods of time away from family is something that we all have had to deal with at one time or another, even if it's just, still stateside. Maybe it's having to go away for a few months for training.
Yeah.
Or for an exercise. We deal with long and oftentimes irregular schedules. Not great for circadian rhythm or homeostasis. And there's some physiological impact that comes with that too. Stressful training environments, and what you and I are both familiar with, unrealistic expectations. And sometimes those things.
No.
Yeah. Ask anybody that's been in for 5 minutes. They'll be able to concur. Those unrealistic expectations are absolutely there. And sometimes I think they're self-imposed. Other times I feel like it's shoved down our throats.
I think it's a combo, because we are trained that we're going to complete the mission no matter what. And then, our population comes from, right, the civilian population. So just like the civilian population, we have highly driven people, we have high functioning people, and we have lazy ass people.
Yeah.
I mean, we have it, but we all know, when the lazy ones are, they're masters at copping out, and people don't want to deal with them. And so they just look to high functioning people to do more. And because of how we're trained, on top of that, okay, we're going to get it done. We're going to get it done. Coach. Yeah. Again and again and again. And then you're like, hey, little Johnny, you're the only one out on the softball field. Or you're like, how are you the pitcher, first baseman, and third baseman? I got this, coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we do. They really exploit those traits in us, and they make you feel like failure is not an option.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, that's how we're trained. And a failure of one is a failure of all, right?
I mean, from day one, we get these core values pounded into our heads: service before self, excellence in all we do.
Yeah.
All of these things that say, if I have to stop and take a knee, take a breather, put my hand up and say, I need a minute, you're a failure. And that's unacceptable. There's no space for it.
And that's another point of being in the military, is that we rarely have control. I mean, the lower ranking you are, the less control you have. Yeah. And how stressful is that? Especially, especially when you have scenarios where maybe that junior person has the right idea or good concept or whatever, and they get squashed over and over. How's that for mental health?
So funny you bring that up, because that was actually one of the points I wanted to touch on too, is, you throw in toxic leadership, and we all know there's no shortage of that in the military. And what do you get? You've got yourself a recipe for a stale shit biscuit sandwich with a side of what the fuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's all these things going against us. Weird hours, tons of stress, a whole lot of responsibility put on our shoulders very early on for a lot of us.
We're groomed for leadership from the moment we go into basic training. I mean, somebody is a leader somewhere, right? And they better not fail.
So it shouldn't be a surprise that stat time. According to a U.S. Census Bureau report from 2015, military members have the highest divorce rates amongst any career.
Still current, I'm sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I know that's a few years old, but I think it would be fair to say we both know plenty of people in our occupation that are divorced or unhappily married.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh.
More than not, probably.
Yeah. Oh, I would completely agree.
Yeah, I read that and I was like, not surprised. When we look at this from both of those lenses, we've got the combat, strategic thing going on here, and then kind of the miscellaneous everything else that just comes along with wearing the uniform. That's a lot to take in. These people come home from overseas and are immediately expected to just pick up right where they left off.
Oh, yeah. And it's worse if you have a spouse that's new to the military that doesn't have any understanding of it. So you're married to civilian male or female or whatever, and you come home and they're all excited to see you, and they're like, let's jump back into life. And you've been ass beat for 6 months, year, whatever it is. You've seen things that are, made up of other people's nightmares. And now you have to jump in and do the laundry and cook dinner and take care of kids. And the kids are demanding, and the wife is demanding, or the husband's demanding. And you're like, holy shit, what am I doing?
Yeah. Just pick up, plug in, and play, and expected to carry on with life as if the last deployment, 6 months, year, whatever that was, never happened. And I think that some people are really good at that, thanks to compartmentalizing and maybe a little bit of denial. And
it's another wonderful thing the military taught us, how to compartmentalize it, because we have to keep moving forward.
We're the masters.
We are. Actually, are there more stats? Because I have one here to count, not counter, but to add to it.
Please.
So that's the general military side, right? So on the medical side of it, and this is just this was a study from Yale. Let's see. It was February 2021, and they basically had 1,092 participants. 72% were female, and then they had 51% were frontline workers. And this is what they found. Oh, and the average age was 40 years old. And I say that because our Guard and Reserve, that's about their average age too. But this isn't military. This is just a general, this is all about medical and mental health. And so this is the numbers they came up with. 13% had probable major depression. almost 16% had general anxiety disorder. 22.8% had PTSD. And 42.8% had alcohol use disorder. The one it didn't have in here, which I was curious about, was what about the drug use part?
The prescription drugs.
We have access to them. I mean,
I know where the Pyxis is. Yeah.
And so for a civilian counterpart, if you don't know how this game works, and not that I'm an expert because I've never done this, but we know how the game works, is that when you have a narcotic, let's just say morphine, right? And it's a 10 milligram vial. Well, typically you don't give that much to a patient. You'll maybe give 1 to 3 milligrams, just a small amount. And then you have to waste the rest of it. And you're supposed to do that with another person, and that you waste it all. And what can happen is that somebody can get crafty and they can waste what maybe looks like maybe they left a milligram. and maybe the other person didn't see it, and they will pocket that. And so they'll do this over days, and then they use that for coping, right? And I've seen it personally. I lost a good friend due to that. It was heartbreaking. She was intelligent, an amazing nurse. And we didn't know that she was suffering from really, really, really bad back. She was in the military, so she's trying to get it done, trying to keep going. And she was taking narcotics, and unfortunately it led to an overdose, and we lost her. So we didn't know. Her friends, her good friends, didn't know.
So I think it would be fair to say that SUDs, or substance abuse disorders, oftentimes start off as trying to mitigate or fix or mask pain. It might not necessarily start off as a mental health issue. It starts off, I think, for many people, just a way to cope with pain.
They're trying to find a way to release, to relax, and can be pain. In her case, it was direct pain. In a lot of military, we're all broke as a joke. I mean, you come out on the other side after a whole career. If you tell me you have no issues,
you're a liar.
You are a personalist.
You sit on a throne of lies.
Right. So, they use it to alcohol, right? I mean, we see this across the board, not just with our medical people, but with the military in general. And alcohol is an easy one to go home and have a drink, right? And functional alcoholics, right? They're not using anything at work, go and have a drink. What's interesting, I would love to see for the drug use, we get a wonderful P-test. So it's very hard. I won't say very. It is harder for us to be long-term substance users and not eventually get caught somewhere along the way. I'm sure there's tricks and trades and stuff like that, but you have a quizzical look on your face.
Well,
Emsy's thinking.
You touched on something with alcohol, and immediately the first thought that came to the forefront of my mind was, well, that's part of my enlisted culture.
Yeah.
I mean, literally from the time we get started, you're in the barracks, drinking alcohol. Go anywhere overseas, alcohol. That's just
when I was a flight nurse.
What we do.
Oh, when I was a flight nurse. Yeah. You should see some of the tables. You'd look and you couldn't see the table. It was just round after round. We have a hard mission. We've been working a lot of days, whatever. This is our release. It's our come down, because when you drink, you relax.
Yes.
And you can hide behind, oh, I was drunk, to get to act silly or act out or whatever. And all of us we're willing to deal with the consequences of a hangover, because we're all 22 and we can cope and do whatever, we can move on.
And that sure ain't going to show up on a UA screening, right?
No.
Unless they're testing specifically for alcohol, of course.
Right. But that's in and out of your system in hours.
Yeah. And so long as you're over 21, no harm, no foul.
It's true.
It's such and not that I'm condoning it or saying that it's right. Please don't come for me. I'm just saying.
It's an easy way to relax yourself.
Yeah. Easy access
but what does it not do? Some people will use it, like our service members with like PTSD and whatnot. I've seen it. You've seen it, right? They're coping with alcohol. The hard part is, for some people, it becomes the addiction. And so some people have the addictive gene, and when they're trying to stop, they can't stop. And here's proof of that. I had somebody that had PTSD and was telling me I was drinking a bottle of Jack a night. And I was like, God bless it. And he's like, yeah. He goes, but it didn't do anything. It didn't help me. And so I stopped. And I went, you're not an alcoholic. Clearly, you're not an alcoholic. I mean, it didn't work for me. Other people, that's not the case. So it's the one sip and they find that they can relax, and there they go. And everybody does it, right, away from the scene. Yep. Yeah, I mean, unless you're having a party. But I mean, everybody's coping out of the eye of everybody else. We're all coming down at home, in the bathroom, and, wherever it is. But we're not doing it with each other.
Yeah.
We're not. Unfortunately, we need to do it more. But there's always that fear for us. What if my career, I lose my career.
Yes.
What if I lose my career and then I can't provide for my family? What if the shame, I lose rank or, something like that? There's shame and there's guilt that comes with that versus
vulnerability.
Yeah. Versus I had my ass handed to me and I'm not coping well. Some people come to that, and I'm very thankful when they do. And when they put a hand out and there's hands to help them. But the military collectively, we're like, can we use you for a deployment? Oh, we can't. Oh, okay, well, you go over there. We got to go.
Yeah.
You have to be good to go. Are you not?
Medical readiness. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
mobility readiness. It's a key.
And we're not
here to do.
And we're not going to go down the rabbit hole because we'll do this at a whole other topic. But then when we don't have the actual plethora of resources we need to help them get back to where they need to be. And so like military medicine, as far as resources available, that's a whole other topic.
So all of a sudden these people come home, or even if this is non-deployment related, they've got some kind of invisible wound. It might be anxiety, depression, PTSD, whatever the it is. And their friends, their family, their loved ones are looking at them like, who even are you? This person is angry or withdrawn, just behaving erratically in ways that are unlike them, and they're changed. They're different. And
they don't know what to do. They don't know. Now here's a big difference though. You started on saying that. That's what popped in my head was, yeah, they've changed and we don't know who they are. Commanders might see it. And here's where the other rub lies, is that when we are getting medical care, it's semi-private. If you need mental health care or you need some, rehab, alcohol rehab or whatnot, it's not like the civilian world where you could quit your job and then you could go get that care, or you could go to part-time. There's a way that you could do it that people probably wouldn't even know that it's going on. Yeah. Not saying always, but I'm just saying there's plenty of scenarios where you could do it. There's definitely a lot more flexibility in that. We don't have that. We don't get to walk in and say, hey, I need to step out. Like I'm falling apart and I'm just going to quit and I'm going to go take care of this and then I'll be back. And they're like,
can you imagine the commander? He'd probably look at you and be like, the fuck you are? No.
I mean, I'm going to give the military credit. They are trying. They are trying to be better, right? They are trying to handle things better. They are trying to be more, the new sexy was leadership being more vulnerable, that kind of thing. So they are working on it. But we struggle, the military struggles with that, because if we're focusing all on everybody that needs the care, needs the help, and needs the this, we can't go do our mission. Commanders get caught in these very tough situations that are very hard.
And I don't completely disagree with the why behind that. I think that there's a time and a place for them to have that awareness and understanding of what their service members dealing with, because let's be honest, we've got a little bit more on the line than if I was, working at a retail store.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reason why a commander probably should know if they have somebody that's falling apart at the seams. I don't disagree with that per se. What is concerning to me is how oftentimes those sensitive details become, I won't say common knowledge in the office, but too many details get out to the wrong people.
Yeah.
And I mean, it happens all the time. Patient protected information just freely handed out. Mm-hmm. And I know that happens, in the private sector too. I'm not naive enough to think that it doesn't, but I see it happen all the time. And even dealt with the situation personally where that happened. I was receiving care and happened to have a coworker. She wasn't a supervisor. She wasn't my commander.
She had no need to know.
No.
Position.
Absolutely none, but felt it appropriate to reach out to a treating provider that I was seeing, saying, hey, Sergeant so-and-so is a mutual patient. I'm just trying to get a little bit more details on X diagnosis and kind of what that treatment plan looks like and figure out, where we're going from here. And thank God, my real provider immediately said, no, this is inappropriate. You and I both know that this is wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and terminate the phone call, and then followed up by letting me know what had happened. So I ended up going to the local privacy officer and just asking the question, hey, is this a problem? Because it feels a little invasive. This is somebody without a need to know. Come to find out, this person was not a first-time offender. And because no clinical details were shared with that person, I didn't have a case. So there was no way to hold her accountable.
They don't even go back and talk to her and say, hey.
Allegedly they did, but there was no tangible,
right,
repercussion the way and maybe just because I was.
If there's 5 cases that have been reported, and even though the transaction didn't go through, we need to talk to you. You're a liability here.
Yeah.
That's really where I personally think it should be.
Absolutely. I mean, can you imagine if I worked at Target and my manager at Target calling my, mental health care provider saying, hey, we just want to get a little bit of information on Susie's recent diagnosis. Hell no. No. That's just a mess waiting to happen.
So when we've kind of talked on different realms, because the one thing we both know is we have 2 layers, and we have the military layer, and then we have being medical. And we have this stress of always getting the mission done at any cost, got to get it done. We have the medical of saving lives, right? Got to keep them alive. We got to keep going. And then you put all that stress on, and we have easy access to medication, fentanyl, the street drug. Well, we have fentanyl, the controlled substance, right? I mean, we have access to this stuff. We know how to use it. And we put the pressure. And then somebody ends up in a situation of substance abuse, alcohol, or whatever. And then we're like, oh, look, they're using drugs, they're drinking. And we're trying, I'm giving the military credit, they're trying to get better at how do we pull them out of commission to allow them to get the care. The problem is we don't have replacements for people.
Yeah. They're going to continue to sit on the Manning document, and that's
right. Then it turns that whole administrative game of, well, we can't remove them and we can't do this. And we do have some level of when they have, what do they call them? The patient squadrons. They have, but those are very specific.
Like the WTUs, the warrior transition units.
Yeah, they're very specific criteria. And so if this is somebody that just needs time, our version is we'll go take leave.
Yeah.
Take a couple weeks.
But make sure you have your phone on you in case I need something.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, that was a mind blower to me. Came out of the military, my first civilian job in hospital. We got nailed. The unit was just overridden with patients. We needed help. And we had called the call nurse in already. So in the military, we would call somebody else, be like, are you on leave? You're not? Okay, I need you in here. We'll make it up somehow. Or comp time, right? We love comp time. Get in here and then I'll make it up to you later. And I'm working civilian. We're overrun. They said, hey, but we need more help. I'm like, the call nurse is here. I'm like, well, call somebody else. And they're like, well, I mean, we can, but we don't know if they'll come in or not. And if in a moment, I wanted to say, it all came clear to me, but I started to say, what are you talking about? If, and then I went, before the whole sentence came out, I'm like, I'm not in the military, civilian. Okay. Sorry about that. Got you. And I went home. That was a huge aha moment for me. I'm like, oh,
their time is their time.
They have their own time. That's amazing.
So you touched on getting help, right? Mm-hmm. Getting that access to care, we know the timeless song of hurry up and wait. Mental health care is probably one of the worser ends of that piece too. I don't think it's a secret. Getting in to see mental health is not as easy as it probably should be. First, you got to get in with your PCM, and that can take anywhere from 2 to 3 months. From there, you got to get a referral and hope that there's space available with the mental health clinic.
Well, I think you can walk into mental health now, though. You can do walk-ins.
But they will turn away if they're already booked up. So they have these little pockets of time, but it doesn't always work out. They've got some safeguards in place, but it's not going to be a surefire way every time.
It's not consistent.
No.
I mean, and I'll say in general, this is a blanket statement. So I know that there's military mental health out there that is going to say, we get them in, and I'm sure you do. But as a blanket, and as somebody that's taken care of like across many MTFs across the US, in general, if you need care more than 1 to 2 days a week, it's not going to consistently happen. One day they can do, 2 is, that's really pushing it. And the 1 itself may not be super consistent.
Yeah.
And so what do you do?
And I truly do feel for our mental health providers and clinics in general, their med techs, their therapists, all of them, because they have all orders sitting in front of them. Their volume is monstrous, and there's only so many of them
to go around.
Yeah. So then what happens when they get burnt out?
That was my next thing, was where, keeping it back to what we were talking about, what happens when we burn them out? And we have dealt with this all our career because we were both in medicine and we've watched it. And I know it happened in the civilian world, but when it really happened is when COVID hit.
Oh yeah. And
it just wreaked havoc. To this day, I mean, my parents right now, my dad needs a shoulder, most likely needs shoulder surgery. He has a partial tear in his muscle. My mom's like, well, they might rehab it. I'm like, yeah, I doubt it. I said, most likely you're going to need surgery. And I said, when are you going down? And she goes, oh, like in a month and a half. Well, let me tell you, thank God that's a partial tear, because if that was a full tear, that muscle would probably be atrophied and like no go, right? The doctors probably wouldn't even touch it. So I'm like, are you kidding? She goes, yeah, it's like in July or whatever it is. And I was like, holy crap. She goes, they said they don't have enough staff. And hearing that across the board. So for all the young ones that are coming in, I have friends that their kids are coming into medicine. God bless you. We love you. Pace yourself.
And we need you, seriously.
And we do need you, yes.
Especially quality ones, which is another piece of this whole equation too. Just because there are, providers, that doesn't always mean that they're quality. And I'm sure we can think of several times throughout our careers where we've experienced that.
What's the joke? Who's the last person in med school to graduate, the lowest GPA in med school to graduate? What do they call them?
They call them doc. Yeah.
You don't know that.
But then I think too, even if they may be quality, sure, but maybe just not a great fit for that person as an individual. You don't get to shop around the MTF like you might be able to do in the private sector.
That is an extremely good point. We don't get that choice. And if we do, they're like colleagues. So do you really think that it doesn't work that well? We have smaller amounts of providers in concentrated areas, and they all work in the same field, and they're in the same hospital or the same clinic. It's a little awkward. It's not like civilian. You're like, okay, I don't like this provider. I'm going to go across town and find another provider. For us, it would be like, oh, I don't like this provider, I want a new one. And they give you the other person in the clinic. And you're like, oh, hello, awkward.
Yeah, just saw them in the break room not too long ago.
And damn well they're all talking, please. We are it. People talk. And I don't mean in like rude ways, but I'm just saying we talk. Like, oh, now I got Mrs. H. You had Mrs. H. And why is she coming to me? That question comes up.
Yeah.
Well, because I feeding her cornflakes today or whatever it is. Oh. Come on.
You get the other kind of warm handoff, the unofficial one.
The unofficial one, yeah, exactly.
So I was actually able to find online. So the DoD Inspector General's office had completed an evaluation to determine whether or not the DoD was meeting outpatient mental health access to care standards. And big shocker, brace yourself. The findings were not favorable. So what they found was that the DoD did not consistently meet outpatient mental health access to care standards. And I know there's probably people listening right now thinking, well, duh, that's not news.
It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
Well, what was that, 2015 you said? That DoD?
Yes. No, sorry, that one was 2020.
Oh, that was 2020.
Yeah. So it was,
wow.
That part,
pandemic.
Yeah. So that part wasn't surprising to me, but just, I'm a numbers brain person. So this was interesting to me. An average of 53% of all active duty service members and their families identified as needing mental health care and referred to the purchased care system did not receive that care. And when asked why, the MTFs couldn't answer. So either there was scheduling conflicts, nobody reached out, it wasn't a good fit, for whatever reason, over 50% of these people did not get the care that they were not only entitled to, but really needing. And as a result, thousands of active duty service members and their families experienced delays in getting that care. So it goes on to explain that delays may have involved numerous members not being able to, one, see the right provider at the right time, two, obtain mental health care at all, or three, and this is a big one, receive timely follow-up treatment. And we've seen, you and I together have seen the fallout that comes when a service member, gets care and finally makes traction. They're making progress, they're learning, they're growing, they're doing the heart, HEAR, hard work.
Yeah.
And then to see them come so close, just to have maybe the care, ripped out from under their feet.
Or just not step down. This was a huge problem that I ran into this. I fought very hard. You get if we're going to go the full enchilada, they go to inpatient, and then they step out into partial hospitalization, and they step down to IOP, which is
intensive
outpatient, right? So every step is a little less with the therapist and a little more them doing their own, learning how to build the box, right?
Yeah.
And then they get all the way down to when they're into regular therapy, they're going weekly, twice a week, whatever. And that's how it should flow. What we would get is, okay, they've been inpatient. Okay, they're gonna go back to their therapist. No, you there's a lot of steps we're missing in there, right? So you're right. When we don't have consistent care, then we have another problem that we're just compounding. And now we're on a damn freaking hamster wheel going round and round. And yeah, it definitely runs into a more compounded problem. And we're medical. When we work in a hospital or clinic setting, a lot of them are small, right? There's very few big hospitals. I mean, we have, Madigan, Wilford Hall. Well, we don't have Wilford Hall anymore. We have
Walter Reed,
BAMC. Well, we don't have the big as many of them, right? So there's a lot of smaller clinics, and y'all know each other. So you're struggling as a healthcare worker, and now you're supposed to go get mental health care
from somebody that might be a peer.
Right there. Then you're no, they don't offer, at least as far as I've seen, I don't see them offer different mental health care for providers that is outside of the realm. And then the other thing that tends to happen, you hit on this in that study where they said that they're not getting timely care, and medicine had they didn't have an answer for us. And the answer is simple. A lot of times there's just not enough people around to provide for the volume that they have. But what they'll end up doing, and this happened in one of my last meetings before I got out of the military. We were sitting in this invisible wounds meeting, and the person heading the meeting made a comment that they were all at one base. They were visiting there, and people were coming to them telling them, we don't have enough mental health care on this base. So they're referring them all off base, which good, except now off base is saturated because it's taking care of the civilian population and the military population. And you can't get help anywhere. And they came back and said, Now, just remember, I'm telling you this information that this was just one base, and we can't assume that's everywhere, of which I nicely chimed in and said, you can assume it. I can tell you, because that is happening everywhere, because we take care of all of the US. And they're very quiet, and they're like, oh, yes, that's happening. If they don't have enough, they're referring them off base.
It's got to go somewhere.
If you can't get an appointment, what's supposed to happen in 28 days, they're supposed to refer you on. And that's what's supposed to happen. The problem happens when all of a sudden they have space, and I've seen this happen. They're all getting their care off base. It's going well. They're getting really good care. And then they pull them back on. Oh, we have room now. We're pulling you back. And they're like, no, I've made a connection in a relationship, and this is going well, whatever care it may be. Come on back.
So much for that continuity of care.
And I said, we're talking about medicine and medical and healthcare workers with their mental health, but these are all the reasons why we just shut up.
Yeah, they don't want to go.
We're already
There's
trained.
too much of a headache.
We're trained to stick it in a box. We're good at that. We just keep doing that.
Yeah.
Why? We'll take care of that later. We don't do it now.
I think difficult to identify, I'm struggling and I need help right now. It takes a lot of self-awareness to get to that point. And I think courage to stick your hand out and ask for the assist.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody starts that road to recovery, trying to do it with peers can be a bit of a hindrance. Trying to do it knowing that your boss and maybe some of your coworkers know what's going on makes it even harder.
Oh,
so
yeah.
They're, the service member is trying to recover and get to the bottom of the issue. And all the while they've got an audience,
Yeah.
sterile gloving them, and it changes things. All of a sudden, they get treated differently or looked at like a problem child.
Oh, yeah.
Opportunities that they might have had before. Yeah, that's off the table now, buddy.
Oh, and let's look at the situation of here. The commanders are looking and they're like, holy crap, I have to get all this stuff done. And now I'm down another person. And maybe it was a key player. And the military doesn't go, hey, let's get somebody to fill in for them. They're like, sorry, they're on your books. Get them better quickly. Or get rid of them. There's your choices.
Yeah. So then you've got the commanders who want to get all up in their service members' chili. And don't get me wrong, that can be a good or bad thing. There's
That's how it's approached.
Yeah.
That's right.
Are they going to be helpful and supportive, or are they going to be predatory and weaponize that information?
And I've seen both.
Yeah.
I've seen both sides. I've seen them. Unfortunately, I've seen less supportive, and I hate to say it, it's just that what I see is that the commanders don't have the resiliency either. They're burnt out, and so they just take the lowest hanging fruit and make the service member, a target, and take out their frustration on them. And that's helpful to somebody that's already compromised, and they're already feeling like shit anyway, so let's beat them up some more. Why not? But because they're not able to compensate either. So for us, it turns into a big, like you said, shit sandwich, and it really compounds. And then the end result of it usually, well, I shouldn't say usually, I don't have the stats for that, but the end result can be medical board, if they're lucky.
Yeah, that's best case scenario.
As a medical board, at least they get compensation for it. But I've seen them go out the door. Matter of fact, I was talking with somebody, it was like a probation officer. This was like years ago. And she was telling me how a lot of her people were veterans. And I'm like, Lord. And they were just separated. And she goes, they all have PTSD. Separated. So they have no financial fallback. Goodbye.
Somebody else's problem.
Yep.
Get them out of our hair.
Yep. So
they're not wanting to see it through. And that's another route you see commanders take sometimes too, is they'll just be so hands off and disinterested in the situation with the expectation that service member continue to keep up with the pace and maintain that same battle rhythm that they've always had. Why? Because we've got shit to do. We get it so ingrained that, that whole service before self thing. And yeah. Not surprised.
All right.
So
you can wind up here.
Yeah. So before we do that, I have a question. If you could be queen for a day, and
not,
oh God, I forgot I'm talking to an officer. ma'am, if you had your magical wand and could make anything happen to make the mental health crisis in the military better, what would you do or change or implement to make this a more efficient running machine?
I would quadruple the mental health. Yeah, I would quadruple their staff immediately. That would be the first thing I would do. And we would start being able to, if we couldn't handle the heavier mental health issues, I would definitely encourage them to do what we do now, which is refer out, but be able to handle more when they come back, be able to have them a couple times a week, to be able to be more consistent. And I would have enough staff that there would be separate staff for medical people, like when you're outside of your clinic, so you can go out and get mental health care quietly and not, and if you do it at a good time and you intervene early on when you first start feeling these symptoms, maybe you can keep working, maybe you can continue on and be strengthened and be strong and move forward. Maybe that could happen. Imagine that, proactive and not reactive.
Quick, put a TM on that. Patent it, because that's actually a great idea. I think that would get a lot more participation by medical professionals who really do need it, because too many times we wind up looking like a bottle of Pepsi, pouring the Mentos in it, watching it explode, and I don't know, man, this just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Whereas if, just like you explained, if we would catch it earlier on and start untangling those knots a little bit sooner before it turns into a basketball, giant knot.
Yeah.
Probably would work out a little bit better for us.
And normalize, even though we're trying to normalize, there's still a huge stigma with it. So I'm hoping that these new generations that are coming in are like, the fuck?
What are you guys doing?
Go get some mental health care. It's no big deal. We put a cast on a broken bone. Go get some care for your brain. And you'll last longer. Shocking. So that's my hope.
Okay. No, that's a great answer. And even putting you on the spot, that was solid. And I would love to see that happen someday.
Mm-hmm.
Was thinking about that for myself too, and would say we have got to break the cycle. Any chance we get, as leaders, as advocates, as coworkers, as healthcare professionals, as supervisors, I don't care if you're sitting at the VFW with your veteran friends, any space you can occupy where you can make a positive difference, no matter your role, continue to push that pendulum in the direction that makes taking care of struggling service members less of a mess, less of a headache.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for better access to care, more quality providers, commanders' education on how to engage and provide an appropriate level of support, kind of avoiding those things we were talking about earlier. I'd say continue educating members and their families on things like emotional intelligence, the risks of developing PTSD, and what some of those warning signs look like too. And really just promote a culture of transparency that encourages members to come forward when something's wrong, instead of scaring them into submission and, having them scared that they're going to lose their jobs or be looked at differently. And I'm sorry, no amount of annual Green Dot training or resiliency stand down day is going to change the narrative on this. It's just not. It's a nice thought. It looks great on paper, but in real life, it's not working. I think actually taking care of people and following through to the end, emphasis on following it through to the end, not, well, you look pretty good today, you must be all right. Wash my hands. Yeah. Not that, and not just when it's a high-ranking member or when it's convenient or when it's easy. Get in and follow it through. Yeah. I think if they would just do that over time, it would garner trust and ultimately, most importantly, save lives, which is what we're here to do.
That's right. And this is what I tell for our civilian counterparts and our civilian friends. If we take better care of ourselves, we become less messes for you when we're all veterans. Just something to think about. That's my wisdom.
Fair enough. I mean, really, at the end of the day, our work, our line of work as nurses, as medics, corpsmen, docs, EMS, whomever.
Yeah, firefighters, all of them.
Yeah. Our jam is the preservation of life. of human life and lending a helping hand wherever we can, making a positive difference in the life of somebody else. It doesn't have to be a friend. It could just be a coworker, somebody that you barely know. It doesn't matter. If you have the capacity and power to make a positive difference, do it. And I would challenge anybody listening, in uniform or not, to do that. If you see someone in an uphill battle, tune in. You might not have the power to coordinate their care or offer interventions, but what you can do is sit down and listen.
And the rule of sevens goes to that. Do you know what the rule of sevens? Have you heard of that?
No.
It takes 7 interventions on average before there is a positive turn or a positive outcome. That's a typical rule of thumb for like domestic abuse and anything really. It's a rule of 7. Even like in the sales world, like you have to have it in front of somebody on the average of 7 times before they'll buy the product. So it's a rule of 7. And so you don't know if you're going to be number 7 to make them go, "Ooh, I need help," or "I'm going to do this to make the change." You don't know what number you are.
Yeah, no, that's great advice.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I'm on like number 27 of diet tries. I'm waiting any day now, any day.
This is going to fall off.
Yeah, finally, maybe someday. Point being, just offer that space, offer your time. It's amazing just how therapeutic it can be to sit and talk it out sometimes.
Yeah. And even if it's indirect, right? Sometimes you're just hearing other stories and you're nodding your head like, yeah, I can relate.
Yeah.
And you hear somebody else how they resolved it or they dealt with it or whatnot. And you're like, And maybe you quietly go home and try that yourself. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right.
So to close us up, Detox and I hit on some maybe things that might be a little bit triggering. If you or maybe somebody you know is considering suicide, please, please, please contact the National Suicide Prevention Line at 1-800-273-8255. If you're a veteran struggling and need to talk, please dial 988 and press 1 to reach the Veterans Crisis Line. Are you a texter? No problem. Text 838255 for 24/7 support. You don't have to be enrolled in VA benefits or healthcare to connect. Thank you for listening. We wish you well.
Have an awesome week, everybody. Peace out.